G'day guys, Mystery Maker here. First off, I'd like to welcome you to the channel, and I thought I'd tell you a little bit about myself. I'm a pretty chill guy, into games and a bit of zen. I do however like the freak and odd story. Demon possession, haunted locations, just general freaky stuff. So I decided to make a channel and share some stories with you guys. I'm pretty new to all this stuff, so all your views and opinions on my videos really matter to me. Anyways, that's enough about me. Welcome again, and thank you for watching. Story 1. Demonic Distraction. I asked my friend last night if he had ever seen a ghost or anything like that. He told me when he went to Athika, maybe 15 years ago, he and a friend and 2 girls were on their way to a party. They were at a part of the campus that was very old and had old Gothic architecture. He wanted to emphasize how big this building he was in was. He said there was a corkboard on one wall, a single solid piece that was 40 feet long unbroken. He said while the other people were talking, he kept getting distracted by this part of the room in the distance behind them that seemed unnaturally and unusually dark. He found himself staring into it. He said he felt colder than he had ever felt in his life, and suddenly he was paralyzed to the point that he couldn't even breathe. He was overwhelmed with feelings of dread and terror. He was in a full-blown panic because his friends seemed to not notice he had been standing there, not moving. He almost came to peace with the idea of dying because he could not breathe or blink or anything. After a while, he finally summoned the strength from deep within to break free. When he did so, he regained movement and bumped into his friend, and to his surprise, found out that by hitting his friend, he snapped him out of exactly the same paralyzed trance-like state. His friend said he also felt the terror and cold. He said they just ran away as fast as they could, and when they finally caught up with the others, they'd said that they'd been staring at the corner of the room for about 20 minutes, completely silent, not the 1 minute he thought had elapsed. Later, he discovered a nearby cliff, which is apparently famous for a lot of suicides, and that giant corkboard was end to end covered with flyers and articles about missing persons and student obituaries. He said the media doesn't report on the bizarrely high number of suicides and paranormal reportings because it's such a prestigious high-class school. The kids of all these rich people who are the investors and donors for the media go there so they don't want the negative press. He didn't specify if the suicides are caused by just high pressure of medical school or if it's a demonic force that drives people to kill themselves. My friend has never really lied to me, especially not about something big. If he told me he was alone, I believed that he had experienced something like hallucinating. I've had dreams and sleep paralysis like that, but the fact that it happened to 2 people while fully conscious, standing up, I don't know what to make of that. It really creeped me out. Story 2. Demonic Distraction. I frequently go bushwalking all throughout the Blue Mountains, New South Wales, Australia, and have done so since I was a kid with my dad. Sometimes, for shorter walks, I go alone. Yeah, that could be dangerous, and as a woman, I could have added risk of being attacked or whatever. But I carry a couple of knives with me, so I don't really feel threatened. And I always bring a satellite phone. I just love and crave that feeling of being entirely surrounded by the bush. Anyways, around 5 years ago, I thought it would be a good idea to do an overnighter walk by myself. Shit idea. The walk was fine, 3 or 4 groups of people came by the other way, and on the first day, I picked a little area to stay overnight towards dusk, cut a few ferns back, and I had space to stick my little 1-person tent. I was maybe 30 or so meters from the track, mostly out of sight behind trees and such. The usual wildlife noises were going on as I drifted to sleep. Though there was a strange noise, I can only describe it as a bounding sound, like someone was sprinting through the bush right past me, but it went way too fast with too few steps to carry a person that distance. Also, if you've ever seen this bush in this part of Australia, you'd know there isn't much space on the ground to walk freely if you're off the track. You'd have to wade through at least bushes, ferns, etc. Very rough terrain, so you can't exactly sprint full speed without eating shit. I felt a bit uneasy, but thought it was probably just stuff falling from a tree or whatever. The next morning, I had brekkie and packed up my things and kept going along the track. Passed a couple of people going the other way, then was alone again for maybe half an hour. Then I heard the sound of a stick being broken, like from someone stepping on it. The sound came from behind me and to my left, away from the track. I turned around and to look and nearly fucking died on my feet. A fair distance into the bush was something standing there, and looking directly at me. I wanted to believe it was a person, but it wasn't. I can't judge the exact height, but it was obviously very tall. I'd guess 9 feet. Its skin was dark grey or brownish. It had a horrifically large head with huge black eyes. I couldn't see a mouth or anything, and its arms were really long. I was almost crying, tears welled up in my eyes, completely frozen, staring at this creature. It was like my legs were locked in position. The longer the stare went on between me and the creature, I had this ever-heightening feeling of absolute dread, like nothing I'd ever felt before. The fear built up till I could see my heartbeat in my veins, in my vision, and I suddenly bolted. I sprinted away, continuing on the track. I ran and was too scared to look behind me. Tears were streaming from my eyes as I was running away. I didn't stop until I actually caught up with some people going the same direction as me. They looked at me and were saying, "Oh my god, are you alright?" I was exhausted from running so hard for so long. Told them I saw something in the bush and asked if I could walk with them the rest of the way. It took me 6 months, but I did start bushwalking again. But I never go alone these days. You couldn't pay me to do it. Story 3. Demonic Oppression. I would like to start by saying whether you believe in demons or not, I can for one say that I know they are real and they do exist. What I'm about to share with you are real events and not fictional. This is why I mention no name, including the demon's name. I get chills just recounting these encounters. To preface, I'm a 45-year-old gay male. My demonic encounter started when I moved into my first apartment in the summer of 1992. I was 20 at the time. Unfortunately, my demonic encounter lasted for nearly 8 years before I could finally get rid of it for good. I will only cover a few of the most terrifying occurrences that happened over that 8-year period. Now, on to my story. I had moved to Casper, Wyoming, a town about 55 miles from where I graduated from high school that year. A friend of mine turned me onto a cute 2-bedroom apartment on Elm Street. Yes, I did say Elm Street, folks. The apartment was on the basement floor of a 2-story house that had been converted into 2 apartments. My friend had recently moved onto the main floor apartment and suggested then my boyfriend at the time and I take the bottom unit. It was an ideal situation since we all worked at the same mall at the time. It was mid-June and there was no air conditioning in the apartment at the time. So you can well imagine it was pretty flipping hot in that apartment. I was in the middle of painting the master bedroom when I decided to take a break from the fumes and the heat and headed to the kitchen to get a tall glass of iced tea and have a quick smoke. Now keep in mind, I was the only one in the apartment at the time as my boyfriend was working. If I recall, it was around 11 PM and he was not due home until after 1 AM or around there. After finishing my smoke, I headed back to the bedroom to finish painting. As I walked back into the room, every hair on my entire body stood on end. My heart began to beat out of my chest as I realized there was something painted on the opposite wall of where I'd been painting. There was no paint spilled on the carpet, and the brush I had been using was right there where I left it. Heart still pounding, I slowly crept up to the wall. The paint was still wet and slowly dripping down the wall. I gasped in horror as I read what was painted on the wall. It simply read, "I am here." I bolted the fuck out of there and waited outside on the stoop until my boyfriend came home from work. I was not about to go back to the apartment again by myself. My boyfriend, being a skeptic, dismissed it as maybe I had done something by myself without remembering, or that the upstairs neighbour had snuck in and maybe painted it, even though they were not home at the time the occurrence had happened. Fast forward a few months. We'd been gone all day. It was late when we got home. Having an early day the next day, I headed for the shower while he grabbed himself a beer. As I was showering, I heard the door to the bathroom open and close. I remember smiling to myself, thinking he was going to come join me in the shower for some playtime. I was in the middle of rinsing the conditioner out of my hair when I heard the shower curtain slide open. "Decided you want a quickie before bed, eh?" I asked, still rinsing my hair. "Sounds good to me," said a voice that was not my boyfriend. The voice sounded gravelly and low. About that time, I felt ice-cold hands grab my shoulders from behind. I spun around in horror, only to discover that I was in the shower, alone. I exited the bathroom in such haste I did not even bother to grab a towel. Heart pounding and dripping wet, I was now in the front room panting and trying to catch my breath. My boyfriend shaking uncontrollably and pointing to the bathroom. His eyes were fixed and he appeared to be in a state of shock. His voice quivering, he whispered, "I saw it go in there." Fast forward 2 years. We had just moved into another basement apartment. This one was on the other side of town. It too was a house that had been transformed into two separate units. The owner of the house and his boyfriend lived upstairs and were offered a killer deal as far as rent. I think we were paying $200 a month for the two-bedroom apartment. We had only lived there for about 2 months before the demonic activity started up again. There were old-fashioned swinging doors like you would find in those old Western movies that separated the front room and the kitchen. We had lived in the new place for about 2 months and there was no supernatural activity of any kind. We were thinking maybe the entity had not followed us to our new home and had begun to truly relax. We were dead wrong. My boyfriend and I had just finished up in the bedroom and was settling down to sleep when the saloon doors between the kitchen and living room began to swing back and forth with a vengeance. The nightlights in the kitchen and our bedroom went out, leaving us completely in the dark. "Come play with me," a demonic voice called out to my boyfriend from the kitchen. It was so loud it echoed through the entire apartment. Still shrouded in complete darkness, he and I both shook uncontrollably under the covers. We began to quietly argue over who was going to make a break for the light switch located on the wall by the door. Not knowing what else to do, I yelled for it to leave in Jesus' name. The entity roared so loudly I swear you could feel the whole house shake. We could hear the saloon doors fly open, the night lights came back on, and we were alone again. For how long, we didn't know. It took us about 20 minutes before we could muster up enough courage to move. Needless to say, we did not get any sleep that night, and had every light in the place on. Fast forward another couple of weeks. Our company for the evening had just left and my boyfriend and I had settled in our recliners in the front room to watch a movie and chill for the remainder of the evening. A loud knock on the front door, signalling one of our friends had probably forgotten their or something caused my boyfriend to pause the movie and head to the door. He stopped short and shot me a concerned look. Puzzled, I asked if he was going to get the door or not. He pointed out that the motion-censored light was not on. Opened the door, he visibly shivered as there was nobody there and no vehicles in the driveway but our own. As he shut the door, there came a loud crash and the sound of glass breaking in the kitchen. Walking into the kitchen, it took me a minute to figure out what had happened. The coffee pot that was tucked into the corner by the sink was now laying in a zillion pieces under the dining room table. The knocking started up again on the front door. Again, no light to indicate somebody was actually there. Then the knocking switched to the back door. Actually, it was more like a pounding. The pounding was so hard and so loud I was sure the door was going to cave in. The air became thick and heavy, so much it was hard to breathe. That was enough for us that night. My boyfriend and I bolted out of the house and spent the remainder of the night at a local Denny's restaurant drinking coffee, too terrified to return to the house until morning. Now fast forward a couple of years. By this time we had found a beautiful 2-story home to rent. We loved it because there was a spiral staircase between the 2 floors. The front door led you to the main floor of the home where the kitchen, dining room and living room were. The back door leads you into the basement where the bedrooms and bathrooms were located. It was a cute little house and we loved it. That is until the entity found us again. I say this after each move it seemed it took a while to either find us or decide to show it had anyway. I would usually dream that I was standing in a large room with doors all around it. In the dream, all the doors would start slamming shut, one at a time as I ran from door to door trying to escape. As the last door would slam shut, the room would fill with demonic laughter, which is how I knew it had found us again. The night after having this dream, my husband and I were downstairs in our bedroom, putting our laundry away when we heard my mother hollering down to us from the top of the stairs for us to come up and visit her. We shot one another a confused look because my mother lived about 55 miles away and never came over without calling first. That and both the front and back doors were locked. Thinking maybe my mum had made a copy of our house key, and of course not wanting to be rude, I headed upstairs to visit with my boyfriend hot on my heels. As I approached the top of the stairs, I could see the front door was still locked and there was no sign of my mum anywhere. The temperature in the living room had dropped drastically, causing me to shiver. As I moved into the living room, my boyfriend walked to the front door, opened it, and confirmed that no car was in the driveway. That is when we both saw a large black mass make its way slowly across the wall from the kitchen into the dining room. Its slow movement appeared to be deliberate, as if it wanted us to see it. As it moved through the dining room into the front room, my mother's picture flew off the wall past me and went straight down into the basement. As the years progressed, so did the entity's activities. It had gotten so bad that even our friends and family refused to come over. They too would see the black mass, witness things moving on their own, and hear disembodied voices calling their names. One morning, I had just arrived home from a 13-hour shift and had settled on the couch to watch some television before heading to bed. Out of nowhere, there was a huge boom. It sounded like a bomb had gone off. The whole house, and I do mean the whole house, began to shake violently. It only lasted about 10 or so seconds. I am not sure because it felt much longer than that. I quickly ran outdoors thinking maybe a gas main in the neighbourhood had exploded, or maybe we had an earthquake. All was calm and still. No one else seemed to even be aware that something major had just happened. As I was on the phone to the police department, reporting what had just happened, my boyfriend and my brother, who had stayed the night in our guest room, came tearing upstairs in a panic. Their faces were pale and white, and you could see they were truly terrified. The police assured me that nobody else had reported anything and that maybe it was just my house settling. My brother said the house shook so violently, it shook him right out of bed onto the floor. I knew then it was the demon, and it was time to try to rid ourselves of it once and for all. I had several ministers, priests, and mediums come to my house. The mediums were at least more helpful. The religious men were too afraid to do anything at all, and simply said, "Pray," and left. I finally found a minister who specialised in deliverance ministry. She was well versed in dealing with demonic activity and getting rid of it. She was able to ascertain the demon's name, which gave her power over it. She told me it was not her exorcising the demon, but rather the power of the blood of Jesus. I also learned that the demon was not actually attached to me, but rather my boyfriend. I'm not comfortable sharing what he did. It involved graveyards and witchcraft, some pretty graphic stuff. I learned the reason why it always took the demon a while to show back up was because of the cleansing rituals I had been doing. They were working to a point, but that my boyfriend was the one that kept opening up the door, so to speak, for it to return. Needless to say, I was finally able to rid myself of the demon and my boyfriend. Unfortunately for him, the demon followed him and his life quickly fell apart. He got into drugs, alcohol, and worse. He passed away last year unexpectedly. We remained friends over the years and would talk on the phone or text. I spoke to him a week before his death, and he had told me he was still being tormented by the demon. I have no idea what actually happened to my ex. It's all kind of being kept hush-hush. I just pray that he is at peace now.